The night before my wedding, my mother whispered something that made my blood run cold. If your fiancé's family sees us, the wedding is over. She wasn't being dramatic. 3 days earlier, my parents had received a letter from a lawyer ordering them never to contact, visit, or even approach the family of the man I loved. I thought it was an ugly misunderstanding between two proud families. I had no idea that a forgotten television commercial, watched by millions, was about to expose a secret buried for 26 years. My name is Elena, and until that week I believed my parents' marriage was the safest thing in my life. My father, Daniel, repaired old radios in a tiny shop behind our house. My mother, Rosa, taught music at an elementary school. They had never been wealthy, but they had built our home around simple things: Sunday soup, scratched wooden chairs, my father humming while he worked, and my mother leaving handwritten notes beside my breakfast plate. Then I became engaged to Adrian Vale, whose family owned Vale Meridian, a national company with hotels, restaurants, and a polished public image. Adrian had always been different from the cold, distant world surrounding his surname. He loved ordinary places, remembered waiters' names, and laughed at himself. When he proposed beside a rainy lake, I said yes before he finished asking. I thought our families would eventually become one. Instead, Adrian's mother looked at my parents' names on the invitation and went completely pale. Before we begin, if you enjoy emotional and inspiring stories like this, make sure to support the channel by liking this video, subscribing, and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories of kindness, hope, and humanity. The next morning, Adrian's father, Victor, called my parents to his office. I was not invited. When I asked what happened, my father only said, "There are some people who should remain strangers." My mother refused to meet my eyes. That frightened me more than anger would have. Rosa had always been the person who demanded answers from everyone, including doctors, principals, and policemen. Now she folded laundry with trembling hands and repeated the same sentence, "Please, Elena. Don't ask." I asked Adrian. He looked genuinely confused. Victor had told him only that my parents had crossed a line years ago. Adrian promised he would find out. That evening he returned with a face I had never seen before. His father had forbidden him from marrying me unless my parents agreed to disappear from the wedding completely. He said they know what they did, Adrian whispered. But when I asked what they did, he wouldn't tell me. My father packed a small suitcase that night. "We're leaving until this is settled," he said. I stood in the hallway, blocking the door. "You're my parents. If there's something terrible, tell me." Daniel looked at me for several seconds, then reached into his pocket and gave me an old brass key. "If you ever need the truth, open the bottom drawer of my workbench." He left before sunrise. I waited until the house was silent, then drove to his shop. The key opened the drawer, but inside there was no confession. There was a faded photograph of a young woman standing beside a delivery van, holding a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. On the back, in my father's handwriting, were 5 words, "We promised we would return." Before I could understand them, Adrian called. "Turn on Channel 7. A commercial was playing for Vale Meridian's 25th anniversary. The screen showed old footage from the company's early days, the first hotel, the first restaurant, the first employees. Then came a grainy clip from 2000. A young Victor Vale stood outside a burning warehouse while reporters shouted questions. The camera moved toward a woman carrying a baby away from the smoke. I dropped the photograph. The woman was the same woman. And the baby wore the same yellow blanket. Adrian arrived at my house 10 minutes later. "That woman," I said, showing him the photograph. "Who is she?" He stared at it. Her name was Maribel. She worked for my grandfather. My father had always told me he hated fire. The commercial continued. A narrator described the warehouse fire as the moment Victor Vale saved the company from financial ruin. But beneath the footage, for one brief second, another image appeared, a younger Daniel, my father, standing beside Mara. Adrian replayed the commercial. Then again. On the third viewing, we noticed something strange. The footage had been edited. A section had been removed. We searched the internet, old newspapers, anything we could find. Finally, Adrian found a retired cameraman named Samuel Ortiz who had filmed the original report. Samuel lived 2 towns away. We drove there that night. He listened without interrupting. Then he opened a metal box and removed an old videotape. I was told never to show this, he said. But I kept it because I knew one day someone would ask. The tape showed the warehouse after the fire. Mara was crying. Daniel stood beside her. Victor approached them. You said nobody was inside, Daniel told him. Victor answered, nobody who matters. Mara stepped forward. My son matters. Victor lowered his voice. If that baby is connected to me, everything collapses. Adrian froze. Samuel stopped the tape. My father, he whispered. Samuel nodded slowly. Mara told me she had a child with Victor. She feared he would take the baby. Your father paid her to disappear. Adrian's face hardened. Paid her. Samuel shook his head. Not to disappear. To escape. There's a difference. The missing section was finally recovered from an old duplicate tape. It showed Daniel giving Mara money and a bus ticket. Then he said something that changed everything, take the child somewhere safe. I'll tell my daughter someday, when she's old enough to understand. I stared at Adrian. He stared at me. My father wasn't your enemy, he said quietly. He protected my mother. But there was another revelation. Mara had not been Victor's lover. She had been his assistant, and Adrian was not her biological child. The baby was Victor's nephew, whose parents had died in the fire. Victor had hidden the truth because the boy was heir to a trust worth millions, and admitting the child existed would have forced him to share control with another branch of the family. Mara had raised him temporarily, while Daniel helped them escape the company's pressure. Years later, Victor adopted the boy publicly and erased the past. That boy was Adrian. My parents had spent 26 years protecting the secret because Mara had made them promise never to expose it unless Adrian discovered the truth himself. The lawyer's letter suddenly made sense. Victor had learned that my father still had the evidence and was terrified the wedding would bring both families together. He wanted my parents gone before Adrian could ask questions. The days that followed were not easy. Truth did not magically repair every wound. Victor's company issued a statement calling the old footage a historical misunderstanding, but Adrian refused to let lawyers rewrite what he had seen. He hired an independent investigator, found records from the trust, and discovered that several documents had been deliberately altered. Mara finally told him everything she had remembered, how she had carried him through smoke, how Daniel had driven them through the night, and how Rosa had opened their home whenever Mara needed a safe place to sleep. Adrian listened without interrupting. When she finished, he reached across the table and took her hand. You should have told me, he said. Mara lowered her eyes. I was afraid. He squeezed her fingers. I was afraid too. But we're not afraid alone anymore. Meanwhile, my parents faced another choice. A journalist offered Daniel a large payment for an exclusive interview. He refused. People deserve the truth, he told me, but not because someone wants to turn our pain into entertainment. Instead, he gave the complete recordings to a public archive, where anyone could see them without paying for access. That decision changed how I understood him. He had never wanted recognition. He wanted the truth to belong to everyone. When the story finally became public, strangers sent letters thanking my parents. Some called them heroes. My father disliked that word. He said heroes were people in stories. He had simply been a man who saw a frightened mother and a child who needed somewhere safe. But every Sunday after that, our kitchen became crowded with people Mara had once helped, and I realized kindness had a strange way of returning, even after decades in unexpected ways. We found my parents the next morning at a small roadside motel. My father opened the door, saw Adrian behind me, and closed his eyes. I'm sorry, he said. Adrian stepped forward. You saved my life before I even knew you. Daniel shook his head. We only did what was right. No, Adrian said. You did what was hard. For the first time, my father cried. The wedding was almost cancelled anyway. Victor arrived furious, demanding that Adrian choose between his family and us. Adrian listened quietly, then placed the old photograph on the table. You spent my whole life telling me loyalty means protecting the family name, he said. Today I learned loyalty means protecting the person who needs you, even when nobody applauds. Victor looked at Daniel. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Then Victor's shoulders dropped. I thought if the truth came out, I would lose everything, he whispered. Daniel answered, you already lost it. You just didn't know when. Victor walked away. Months later, the wedding took place in the garden behind my parents' house. There were no luxury decorations, no cameras, and no carefully staged speeches. My father repaired the old radio and played the song my mother used to sing when I was little. Adrian's mother, Mara, stood beside Rosa, holding her hand. Adrian's father did not attend. Just before we exchanged rings, Adrian looked at my parents and smiled. I spent years believing my family began with my last name, he said. Now I know it began with the people who chose to protect me when they had nothing to gain. My mother wiped her eyes. My father laughed through his tears. After the ceremony, we watched the anniversary commercial one final time. This time, the network had released the complete footage. The truth was no longer hidden. The commercial had been intended to celebrate a powerful family's legacy. Instead, it revealed that the greatest legacy was never money, reputation, or a famous name. It was one quiet promise kept for 26 years. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts or a similar experience in the comments. Sometimes the people who protect us are carrying truths we may not understand until much later. And if this story reminded you that courage and kindness can survive even the darkest secrets, please like the video and subscribe for more inspiring stories about kindness, hope, courage, compassion, and humanity. Years later, whenever Adrian and I visited my parents, that old radio still sat on the workbench. One evening, I asked my father whether he regretted keeping the secret for so long. He smiled and turned the radio dial until music filled the room. No, he said. I only regret that you had to discover the truth through a commercial. I laughed. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows, just like the night Adrian proposed. And for the first time, I understood something my parents had spent their lives teaching me without ever saying it aloud. Sometimes love is not about being seen, thanked, or remembered. Sometimes love is simply choosing to do the right thing, then quietly carrying the weight until the person you protected is finally strong enough to carry the truth themselves.